Well, hello, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you all to our Speak Out series that is brought to you with Fierce Friends. I'll be your host for this evening, Marshall Shore. If you're watching this on Facebook, if you would be oh so kind to share it around. And actually, I'll be announcing that throughout the show because all the folks that share it will be entered in a drawing to win a Fierce Friends t-shirt, which I think is pretty darn cool. That who knew? You get to watch a fun event and maybe win a free t-shirt. So National Coming Out Day, which is why we're all here, October 11th, first started back in 1988. And kind of the initial thing was that homophobia really thrives in an atmosphere of silence and ignorance. And it was really a way to just get people to know or be aware that they knew someone who was LGBTQ plus. And so that was really kind of the origin of the story. Now, Keith Haring did do the artwork for the original back in 1988. He did do a mural here in Arizona in the mid 80s as well, just a couple of years before this. But that's a whole other story, a whole other topic. So my name is Marshall Shore. I am the project manager for the Arizona LGBT Plus History Project. If you want to join us, you're more than welcome to keep tabs on us on AZ Gay History on Facebook. You can also follow us on Instagram. If there are questions after the show, you can always email me at hello@hiphistorian.com. You'll also notice there is a chat section for those of you on Facebook over on the right-hand side. So please feel free to use that as well. Now, some of the things the History Project has been doing is if you're ever walking along Roosevelt on the north side at about 2nd Street, if you look down in the concrete, you'll actually see a plaque that is commemorating a club called the 307. That was a space that was frequented by LGBTQ community from the 50s up until 2000 when it closed its doors. It was also famous for being full of DeGrazia murals. He was a local artist, kind of our Andy Warhol. And so there is a plaque in the concrete that basically is dedicated to just keeping that story alive. Over the summer, we did do a walking tour of Roosevelt for LGBTQ plus history. You can track that down. You can either Google Fruit Loop Tour Phoenix or track it down on Downtown Phoenix's website. It's a walking tour. I think there are 8 stops that might surprise you about some of the history along Roosevelt. And also earlier this year, we were able to, back in 1906, there was a Russian gentleman who passed away here. And as they were ready for burial, they discovered that he was a woman. Even though he'd had 2 wives, moved here because he had tuberculosis. And when they were ready for burial, they discovered he was a woman. And so he was buried here in Phoenix out at Greenwood Cemetery without a headstone. So I'm happy to say that we were able to raise funds earlier this year and actually get Nikolai Duralin a headstone, which I think is pretty important because so many times you hear stories, or I have friends that like their parents are like, trans is a new thing. Well, here we know we have 1906. There are stories before that as well from Arizona history as well. So we're really here for Speak Out, we have some great speakers coming up, going to be telling you their coming out story. I will quickly kind of go through mine. So I grew up in a small town in Indiana of about 25 people, 2 roads, 1 stop sign. And as I was getting ready to actually go off to library school, I figured I should tell my dad I was gay. Now, my dad is 6 foot tall, still has the same crew cut that he's had since high school, and is fairly conservative. And so when I was thinking about telling him, I didn't know what the reaction would be. So I already had all my stuff packed in my car. So in case I had to drive off into the sunset and never be seen again, that was an option. I felt it was important that he either knows all of me or knows none of me. That was his choice. And he was working out in the garage, and I did the whole thing of like every like 30 seconds I'd be like, okay, I'm going to tell him now. And then I would count down. I'm going to tell him now. And I eventually just said, what would you do if I was gay? And he was like, well, why? And I'm like, because I am. And his response was, I figured. And I'm like, it was like so many years of torture I put myself through. But that moment of where I wanted to be open and honest was met with open arms. I mean, my parents still play a very big part in my partner, Paul, and I's. Oh my gosh, I just realized this coming week is our 27th anniversary. So, oh, all right. So I am going to bring in our first storyteller. And you probably know Sister Naviho, just seeing her beautiful face around town as one of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I mean, I actually just saw her earlier today. She was at the rummage sale that the sisters were having over at the Pink Church over at Indian School and 6th Avenue. So that was a lot of fun. And so without any further ado, I am going to bring on Sister Navi so she can share her story. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. That was a fun time at the rummage sale today. I got some good stuff.
Did you really? Yeah, it
I
was. They
did.
had so many stuff there. It's. I was amazed when I first walked in there. I just saw it's just racks and racks and racks of stuff, and then the other rooms, they just had so many things that were just donated, and I was just amazed that the community came together and helped out with the cause that we were doing.
Right. So you are going to tell us your coming out story.
Yes, yes. Just to let everybody know, my name is Sister Navi Ho. I'm with the Grand Canyon Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I am currently the president or the abbess of our order, and I've been a sister for 10 years. Yes, it's been a long time at this
Wow.
all. I know, right? You would have thought it was just yesterday, but yeah, it's been 10 years since I first started or first heard the calling to become a sister. So it's just been an amazing journey, and I just look forward to doing it more. So, so, so my coming out story was interesting. I grew up here in Arizona, or well, Arizona, but I grew up here in Phoenix, and my mom and dad were very loving and caring. They were pretty open to a lot of things. Because they would watch TV and they would watch. My dad's favorite show was Jerry Springer. My mom's favorite shows were like Ricky Lake and Sally Jesse and all that kind of stuff. And it was just interesting, we would see so many things on the screen, and I just like, oh my God, they're talking about gay people. I'm like, okay, this is not a good time. So I but let me go backtrack to when I was younger. When I was younger, I had family members that would call me queer, Twinkerbell, girly boy, and all the other, derogatory names that we might have heard when we were growing up. And you know what? And the biggest advocate for me was my grandmother. She always kept me near me, or she always kept me near her, and I was always just kind of around her. Anytime somebody would pick on me, she would be right there to stomp them down. And it was just it was just amazing to see that our bond that happened throughout the year. And as I gotten older and I got to know that I am different. I'm different from my other cousins. So what could it be? And as I start thinking about it and trying to uncover it as a young man, I come to find out that I'm gay. And that's what the term is, that's what the label is. And so I embraced it and just continued to do what I did. I didn't hide who I was. However, my family really never accepted like gay people. They would always talk about gay people, and they would just tell, really bad things about them, not knowing that, hello, I am gay. um, so the coming out part of the whole thing, I believe, happened twice. The first time was when I was 19 years old, and I knew that I needed to tell my mom, and we were very close, and we hung out a lot, we talked a lot, we talked about everything, and so I took her to her favorite restaurant, Makayo's, right on Central, um, and I knew that I needed to kind of butter her up in a way, but I was so scared. So my brother came with me, and he's like, Let's do this." And so I sat my mom down, let her order whatever she wanted, and we began to talk. And she's like, she just looked at me and says, "I know." And I'm like, "What?" But what was very disheartening about just her saying that was because when I was young and she used to watch the Sally Jesse Raphael and all that kind of stuff, we were sitting there watching it with her, and she told me, she goes, "If my son was ever gay, I would kill myself." And just to hear that at a young age, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be who I was, so to speak. And at that time, when I talked to her, I go, Mom, this was the hardest thing I had to do because of what you said a few years ago when I was younger. And I go, I didn't know how to do this. And so, she apologized for that. She's like, I would never ever disown you or want anything to happen between us and stuff like that. And it just became a great bonding moment. And then, of course, once my mom knew, everybody else knew. And so everybody in the family knew. They treated me different. I mean, I at that time I felt very empowered by what I did, and I stood up for myself from there on. So it was just a very interesting coming out story. The second one was probably a few years ago when I first started to Sisters. I went to go see a movie at the Heard Museum, and it was called Two Spirits, and it had to talk about a young boy or young transgender boy up in Colorado, and he basically knew who he was. He was Two Spirit. He knew exactly how he wanted to be and what to be, and he was murdered. He was murdered up there. And but during the documentary, they mentioned Two Spirit, and that Two Spirit has always been around in many tribes, and Two Spirit has been, they don't. Most of the elders and stuff will know what Two Spirit is because, I mean, especially in the Navajo culture, there is a Two Spirit. As you hear the creation story, you hear of the turquoise boy, and you hear the stories about it. But none of that was really taught to me, that there was a, a different side of the culture that embraced the Two Spirit individuals, and they were
Sorry,
very.
Nabi, can you tell us what Two Spirit means for those that aren't in the know?
Yeah, Two Spirit, basically, you are a person of both worlds. You are from basically the male world and the female world. You are become what they considered a holy person, someone that was considered very valuable within the community. Because as men would go off to war, they would get hurt. So a Two Spirit person would step in for them, whether it's a man or a woman. They would step in for that person and help out, and then vice versa with women. They would help raise the children. They would help, do different things like that within the community. And different cultures or different tribes have different stories for their Two Spirit people. But at that time when I found out what Two Spirit was, and I was like, oh my God, I am Two Spirit. And in part of this documentary, they talked about how this Navajo man was talking about, his grandma would always keep him close. His grandma would always be around him. And come to find out that his grandma knew about Two Spirit people, the Nagle, um, on the Navajo reservation back when. and they were considered shamans, spiritual people, and she always kept her grandson close. And that just brought me back to when I was growing up. My grandma was like my best friend. We would argue, fight, laugh, joke, everything. I mean, she was just the best grandma ever. And it just resonated that I'm a two-spirit person too. I'm a two-spirit. I'm proud to be a two-spirit person, and it just, I felt that was part of another coming out that happened because I didn't know that was what was inside, and I learned, and I grew, and I became. So I feel that I had two different coming out stories.
Well, and then
So
I love the festival that's been going on down at Southmount Community College, the Two
mhm.
Spirit event that's been going on, except for this year because of COVID. But
Right, right.
look
That
forward to that
happened.
again next.
Yes, they actually we actually had the event at the end of, well, it's towards the end of February. It was right when, everything started to lock down and things started to happen. But we did have this the second annual Two Spirit Powwow, and that is basically for any Two Spirit, anybody to come out and just socialize, because that's what a powwow is. A powwow is a time to socialize with your neighbors, your friends, and your family, and just get together and hear songs and hear spiritual. I mean, because that's what the songs are. They're very spiritual prayers, and that's what it means just to be around. When a powwow is going on, is just to cleanse yourself with just the beauty that comes out, and then also the indigenous people, our ancestors, they're there, they're celebrating with us with this powwow, and it just makes it more wonderful. So
I agree. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Can you tell us a little about the rummage sale? Is it over? Is it happening again?
The rummage sale is, let's see, 6 o'clock. It is over. It was for the weekend. They are looking to open it up possibly 2 days throughout the week to do like a bargain buster, because there was still so much there, and so many people might wanted to buy but just couldn't, and so they're thinking about opening it up twice next week or this coming week, and hopefully
Okay.
doing like a bargain buster to maybe do everything like $1. I mean, it, people, are looking for things, and we wanted to be that beacon to help people out. And I think that was a great thing, and I'm very happy that the Grand Canyon Sisters were able to join up with the Pink Church in order to do that for the community.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for telling and I love all the work that the sisters do around town.
Mm.
I always love
Thank you.
going to an event and seeing the white face and just knowing that there's a welcoming beacon in the crowd. So
Yes. Yes, and
thank you
that's why
for
we're here. We're basically here to empower our community to expiate stigmatic guilt, which is the guilt that society puts on you for being who you are. We want to take that out and allow you to indulge yourself and be who you are.
very good. Well, thank you so much and have a great rest of your night.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. So our next person is Teddy, who some of you might know around town. You might also have seen him perform on stage. He's done a lot of different speaking gigs, things like that. So let's welcome Teddy Michael. Hello, Teddy. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Look at that beautiful
Yeah.
flag designed right here in Phoenix in your background.
Yes,
How
I
nice
thought
that
I
is to see that.
thought it important to have that up there.
Indeed. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I know we both came from the Midwest. We were
Yes,
neighbors right next to each other pretty much.
yeah, I'm Ohio native, and I've been here in Phoenix. Thanksgiving will be 6 years, so time flies by when you're having fun, I suppose. But yeah, I've been here in Phoenix for 6 years, really enjoying my time here in the Valley, and excited to be a part of this coming out event because it's really important for us to kind of create community with one another, share these stories, and I'm very fortunate to have a really kind of boring, uneventful coming out story, which is awesome.
Indeed. So, would you like to share your coming out story with us?
Yes, uh, I am 34 years old, and I never really felt like I needed to. I kind of, I guess, backtracking. I just dated whomever. It didn't really matter their gender or how they presented themselves or anything of that sort. So I never felt a need to like have some sort of big sit down with friends or family and say, guys, I'm gonna date whoever. Kind of irrelevant. If they were cool enough to meet my family, then they met my family, and things just kind of were what they were. But when I moved away from home to go to college, I started being able to put words with some internal gender identity and gender expression struggles that I had been facing for most of my life. And upon making it to college, I met a couple of guys who just not only happened to be transgender, but were also two Black transgender men, which was something that I had never experienced before. I always joke and say I never knew that Black trans men existed because I had never met a transgender man who was also Black. Um, and in talking to them and learning more about what it would mean to be transgender and learning more about the transgender community, I said, this makes so much sense. This is totally me. This describes exactly how I'm feeling. This describes where I want to go with my life. And I can actually do something about these feelings that I've had since I can remember. I even remember in kindergarten, my teacher, she asked us all, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I said, a dad. I'm like 5 years old. And my teacher's like, no, really? And I'm like, yeah, dad. So definitely not a phase, not something that I just, met some people, thought what they were doing was cool and hopped on a bandwagon. It was something that was very, very much me, very much a part of who I am. So in coming out, uh, I needed to tell people because things were going to happen, right? I was going to change my name. I was going to start hormone replacement therapy. I was going to eventually have surgeries so that my body would match my insides. And I'm a letter writer. I love to write letters. So I actually wrote letters to both sets of parents, put them in the mail, and waited. At the time, this is 2005. So my parents weren't really hip with like the texting, and I didn't really want to have a phone conversation because I was afraid of what was going to happen or the awkward silence. So I wrote letters and I waited and I heard nothing back. So I wrote letters again because I thought, oh, maybe these got lost. So I think in total I wrote about 3 sets of letters to both sets of parents. And eventually summer break came and I was going to physically see my parents. And I asked them if they had read the letters that I wrote. And initially my mom said that she had. And I said, well, what do you think? And she said, no. Like, I don't really know what that means. To preface that, on my mom's side, a very religious household, preacher's kid, grew up in church, and she just didn't really know what to think. So she decided that it just wasn't going to happen, which was very wrong. And then on my dad's side, um, spiritual, but not really religious. And so I kind of put up a wall between myself and my mom's side because she just wasn't ready. And I didn't have time to wait for her to get ready because I needed to do what was really important for me for my own sanity and mental health, which was start my transition. So mom got put on the back burner and she got put on hold. Whereas on my dad's side, um, my dad was very loving and accepting from the outset. He was super excited to have another son. He was very excited about that. And he said something to me that has stuck with me since that day. And he said, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're going through, but I don't have to understand to love you. And I don't have to understand to respect you. And that's something that's so important Not everybody in our lives is going to understand where we are or what we're going through or how we got to the point where we can make these sorts of decisions and declarations. But those folks don't have to understand to love us and to respect us and to support us. So that's really it. Kind of boring coming out story. Eventually, my mom came around to the point where she could actually like comprehend what was happening. I think it was about a year and a half later showing up in like a suit with facial hair. So I think that's when she kind of got it and understood exactly what was happening. And my family now is awesome. They use the right names, they use the right pronouns, and we don't have any issues. So contrary to like that myth out there that like black families aren't down with LGBTQ plus stuff. Not always true. Same thing with religious folks. Not always true. So if we learn to kind of love and respect ourselves, and then we surround ourselves with people who love and respect us, then that's really what makes a family, and that's what makes a community.
Well, and that's why I don't think your story is boring. I mean, I think you chose to be your authentic self, and just acknowledging that and creating that energy around you, inviting those other people to now partake in that as well. And they did.
I have a very large family. I'm one of 9 kids. My mom is one of 7. My dad is one of 5. And there's a big age gap between my parents and their eldest siblings. So I have like aunts and uncles that are in their 70s and 80s, and they are totally on board. Some of them have even made mention that they see a positive change in me. They see that I'm a much happier person now that I've transitioned. So they would rather their loved one be alive and happy and healthy versus anything else.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing a story that you think is boring, but I think a lot of people find resonance with your story. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks so much for having me. Long live the boring coming out stories. Normalize being who you are.
Exactly. Normalize and just be who you are, be your authentic self. And what's interesting, it's like, and that's kind of almost kind of the pushback with National Coming Out Day is there are some folks that are like, well, we shouldn't have to come out because straight people don't have to come out as straight. They just come out as themselves. And so
that's true. And I can kind of get down with that a little bit, but there's nothing better about being able to say out loud who you are. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't need a parade or balloons, although balloons are fun. But just being able to say out loud who you are to other people, there is a bit of power in that. So I straddle the fence. I enjoy the coming out day and coming out stories, but I also am totally down with normalizing just being your authentic self.
Right. Completely agree. Well, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. I hope that we can have coffee soon so we can sit down and chat about other stuff and how life is going and all the changes and everything. So, all right. Well, have a great night, rest of your night, Teddy.
Bye, guys.
All right. So our next teller is Sharna Horn, who is a licensed mental health clinician here in Arizona. Been practicing since 2007, specialized training and experience with LGBTQ clients, and also ran an LGBT center for 4 years. Originally from LA, for the last 20 years has been in 7 different states. I want to welcome Sharna. Hello, Sharna. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I love your bow tie.
Thank you. I do bow tie Tuesdays here.
Oh, nice. So colorful.
So it's hard to come after those 2 people. They're amazing.
But we're all amazing. Just because of how we've gotten to where we are now.
True.
So tell us a little about you. How long have you been in Phoenix?
I think I'm coming on 3 years come February or March. So still new to the community, so getting connected at this point, but I like it. It's hot during the summer, so I'm just trying to get used to that.
But now the nights are amazing. Well, and the mornings, if you want to get up really early.
I do. I wake up at 5:10 to walk every day.
So tell us your coming out story.
Wow. Okay. So you put me after them, and mine gets really messy because it's been 19 years, and as you said, 7 states, and all the states I pretty much lived in were pretty conservative. So uh, everything happening in each city minus LA. So I'm from LA. At about 9 or 10, we didn't have the terms, of gay and whatnot, but like the behaviors were there. I had a girlfriend that just passed. That's why I moved here. But that's how I kind of figured out originally I was gay, was with her back then. So I came out at 13 to a cousin, and then I took it back. I said, I'm not gay. I'm not gay. And she's like, okay, okay. And then, every year it would kind of come up, and I'd figure out a way to push it off of I'm not gay. There's no way. One day it was kind of funny because I went into my math class. I said, if I don't find any of the girls that are cute, then I'm not gay. I was like, okay, perfect. I walked in, didn't find anybody cute. I was like, okay, I'm not gay. But then, 16 comes around and you're starting to think about colleges. And my thought process was, if I'm gay, I'm going away to college. My family is never going to find out. I wanted to go to Boston, but my parents didn't want me so far from family. So I ended up in Indiana, actually, at Muncie.
Oh, Ball State. Well, there you go. All right.
That's where it's going to start, if you know where it's going to go from here.
Wow. I didn't know we were going to start off in Hoosier territory.
Yep. So my story is pretty interesting. I go away to college. I get dragged to go see Judy Shepherd. I didn't want to go. I had those thoughts that I might be gay. If I go there, there's like gay by association.
So Sharna, can you tell us who Judy Shepherd is?
Yeah, Judy Shepherd was Matthew Shepard's mom. Matthew Shepard was unfortunately beaten and left for dead on a fence post up in Laramie, Wyoming, and then later actually died in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I actually went to college there too. So yeah, that's my life, right? So, but I appreciate it. I remember going there. We got there late. I sat on the floor. We were listening to her, and everything in my head just started going. And I'm like, dude, I'm gay. You can't come out. There's no way you can come out. I'm in the middle of Indiana. I mean, I'm already having culture shock. My dad, in a text message or AOL instant message that I was looking at today before I came here, I had talked to him about me going there and about the culture shock. And he's like, yeah, a Jewish Persian girl doesn't go into the middle of nowhere. Welcome to culture shock. So, so I get back to my dorm room, and I couldn't sleep that night. Like, I was up the entire night. How am I going to do this? I can't be gay. There's no way to be gay. Like, my family's going to hate me. I'd heard like all these negative things from my dad at that time, about gay people. And, back in 97, when Ellen came out, I was actually in the living room watching that episode with my dad. Yeah. And we watched it, and I squiggled my way out the room, and I ran up the stairs so that we wouldn't have a conversation. I later actually got a tattoo for that because of our community. And I normally don't tell people the significance of my tattoo because most people won't understand what it is, So I go to college. I'm in the middle of residence hall that's primarily all, and they were all my friends, super Catholic, super small town, super, just uninformed about mostly any other culture, assuming if you were Jewish, you had horns. And my last name was Horns, so that didn't really help my cause. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to do this. And I did. I ended up dating this one guy for a short period of time, but I broke up with him, and for good reasons. And my roommate was telling me, don't tell him why. You're going to hurt his feelings. I was like, why am I going to hurt his feelings? He did nothing. Well, he's going to think that you're gay because of him. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Well, if we back up probably a month there, I hadn't come out to my roommate, and I had to figure out how to do it. And we had some tragedy happen on our floor. Everybody was super drunk in the hall, and I was just up hanging around with everybody. And I'm like, okay, now it's my best shot. If they're drunk, they really can't run as fast. And the stairwell is right there. Like, I'm not going to do this, because my residence hall director, she was gay. She warned me. She said, my car got totaled last year in the parking lot because it had a rainbow sticker. She actually showed me a whiteboard with a homophobic slur on it saying, hey, be careful when you leave the hall, so that way at night you're more aware, because I normally had headphones in. And so I told them, I mean, there had been a series of coming out that week. I mean, the worst locations. You know, the girls are doing their hair, and I'm sitting there telling two of my friends, hey, I'm gay. And then they're like looking at me, okay. And then I said, don't tell my roommate, you know, and they didn't. And I finally told my roommate, and everybody started laughing. I didn't know what was funny. I didn't know whether to run or just stay where I was at. And I was like, okay, we're going to check out the situation and kind of stay where we're at. And they're like, oh. My roommate then slurs out, the last thing I wanted was a gay roommate, and now I have one. Yes. So it changed our room, because it went from me actually always going to the bathroom to change, because I'm just more of a private person. And when she would change, I would always turn around, but I think that that's common courtesy. And after I came out, it came to, Sharna, you've got to leave the room, or I'm going to go down the hall and change. And at one point I finally said, you're so full of yourself. You think that I'm attracted to you just because I'm gay. That's just not the case. And she's like, what, you don't find me attractive? Mind you, I'm like, you just said you didn't want a gay roommate. And I told you you weren't attractive, which meant you didn't have to worry about the thing that you were worrying about. And now you're worrying that I don't think that you're cute. I'm like, no, I don't. And not every straight girl is attractive. And especially if you're straight, there's kind of like this, in my eyes, this code of conduct, right? You know, if they're straight, they're off limits. You know, you don't sit and, you know, think about them. That's just not the thing to do. So, I mean, yes, I did become one of those, for a short period of time, those rainbow toting, like running down the hall with one of my friends. When he finally came out a year later, I was in a building of 300 people, and myself and the hall director were the only people out. So, I mean, it was a very fantastic thing, because I became so flamboyant. And then I quickly started getting rid of everything I owned with regards to my clothes. And this kind of spans 19 years. This rocked everybody, I think, more than being gay. You know, you're supposed to be a certain way as a woman. Okay, we can accept you. You know, fine, you're gay, but why do you have to dress like that? Was the comment I got 19 years ago. The comment I gave 19 years ago was, I have to dress like this so that way I can feel comfortable about myself. It's not your job to feel comfortable about me. It's my job to feel comfortable about me. It took me 19 years, I'm not going to lie, to get to that place, but it started there, you know, and over time it was, you have to actually continually come out sometimes, right? You know, every time you move, every community you go into, every new job you go into, you're coming out every single time. And yeah, it gets exhausting and it gets frustrating, and you never know where to start. You know, is somebody going to be cool with you, or are they going to be like, whoa, like, I didn't need to know that. You're a person and I'll work with you, but we're good to go. And I've had everything in between. I've been fired. I've left the army because of it. I have had supervisors ask me if I had an agenda. I mean, like, I've had everything. Even in the clinical world, I had a supervisee who refused to have, at that point, I was doing my PhD. This supervisee refused to have a gay supervisor. And I'm like, it doesn't come gayer than me. So this is what we have. So I go to my supervisor, who's over her as well, who's also gay. And I was like, hey, we got some options here. You can take her and work with her, or we can give you an easier person to work with, and we'll work with her on our own. And I finally said, you know what? I don't want this. I want to have a good time. You know, you want bigotry, you know, like the supervisor can deal with it. You know, I've dealt with this, you know, throughout, you know, from the get-go, you know, moved to Colorado, Fort Collins, right? You know, there's one major bar there, and we're all hanging out outside. Every now and again, you've got trucks coming by and, you know, giving out slurs and whatnot. You know, that just was life. And Laramie was so close by. Some of us wanted to go up there, but we were too afraid. I mean, mind you, when I moved there, that was 2004. So you're talking what, 98? So 6 years, and not much has changed. So we avoided Wyoming, unfortunately, And then I moved to Michigan, and Michigan became its own beast, coming out. I'm in a master's program there in a pretty conservative area. I every single time have chosen conservative areas. I don't know why. My soul seems to think it needs to be somewhere conservative to maybe gayify or something. I don't know. But I'm in my master's program, and we have a colleague in one of my classes stating that they'll never work with a gay client. And I looked at my supervisor and my teacher, and he looked at me, and he knows me well enough to know what was going to happen next. I said, well, mind you, it was to get shock value here, and then it goes better. So I said, well, that's not right. If you're getting in, you're never going to know if your client's gay. Your client can come out 6 months in, and you never know. So at that point, at 6 points, you're going to abandon the person, meaning you're going to violate your own ethics code. Well, I'm just not going to have them. I'm like, that's just not the way it goes. So I'm like, okay, well, she was African American. So I said, so I'm never going to counsel somebody who's African American. And she looked at me and she said, that's racist. I said, how is that different than not wanting to counsel an LGBT person? It's exactly the same thing, and it's wrong. So if you want to do this, because she was highly religious, I said, go into pastoral counseling, because you don't fit within the realm of where we're at right now. And when I lived in Michigan, it was a strange transition, because I had more homophobia that happened after I started coming out there. Like, I had my living room window broken 3 times, my car broken into, and my car keyed. And after the 3rd time my house, the window got broken, the 2 cops were in my house. I was like, I'm being targeted. Can you finally tell me that I'm being targeted and do something about it? Only one of the cops would agree to it. It's like, yeah, you are being targeted. There's no way around it. Nobody else is being vandalized but you, and things on my car. So I mean, it's coming out there and moving, and coming out and moving. And I keep telling my mom, we were talking about today, and I was like, how do I tell my story? It's so crazy. I have the most supportive mom, like, since the get-go. So the way that this goes, if I go backwards, I accidentally came out to my dad via AOL Instant Messenger. It wasn't on purpose. I didn't want to do it, and I thought my dad would pretty much disown me. I literally was ready for that. I had a friend next to me. I was like, this is about to go down, and I'm about to be like homeless pretty much, and he shocked me. And then he went to my mom. I said, wait, hold on. I'll pick up the phone, and I want to call mom. So I called my mom, who had just been for a visit like a few weeks before. And my mom's response was, why didn't you tell me? I was there. Why didn't you tell me first? And this morning on my walk, my mom was like, why didn't you tell me first? I said, well, I accidentally came out to dad. And then my dad told my brother. I didn't even have an opportunity to tell my brother. My dad thought that my brother would just kind of go off on me. And it was actually the opposite. My brother, yeah, he's more conservative than me, but when he started dating my sister-in-law, I didn't know this until they had gotten married. He told my sister-in-law on the first date, do you have a problem with gay people? And my sister-in-law says, why? And he's like, well, my sister's gay. And she's like, well, I have no problem. My best friend's gay. Why would I care? So in the least likely places, things would happen, but spanning all of this, I move my way forward now through gender, because gender gets kind of funky in our society now. You're expected to be one or the other, right? And if you defy it, then what do you do? So in my family, I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to. I'm going to throw them under the bus, because they deserve to be thrown under the bus for this. So my family, the greater part of my family has not been supportive of me for that. I have a gay aunt, so we are all cool with being gay. But with and I used to do 3-piece suits. And at that point in time, I fell hard on my luck, had to move back home. And my uncle sat down with me, my aunt sat down with me, and my grandmother sat down with me and said, I have to change the way I look. It's unacceptable and unpresentable in the business world. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I have dress clothes. I mean, I'm wearing bow ties and vests and, dress pants and dress shoes. So what's wrong? Well, you're not fitting what the other people will be okay with. And I said, I don't care, and you should be supported. So I've had this gender battle since I was young. When I moved to Colorado State, I had to convince somebody I wasn't transgender. They kept telling me I was transgender. I was like, I'm pretty full aware of who I am as an individual. I do fall under the trans spectrum, which does, with some of my colleagues here, has kind of baffled them, because I'm not trans, but I don't fully go the female way, if that makes sense. Everything I own is from the men's department. I just went through a health journey, and I dropped a bunch of weight, so I can now kind of physically present the way I want, which is more in a more masculine way, if that makes sense. Because I had throughout the years, even last year, considered doing top surgery to match, who I am. And that was very confusing to everybody, because it's like, well, you say that you're a woman, but you want to change this and you do this. And I think what needs to happen is more people like us need to start populating, meaning we need to start being out. This is why I like coming out, stuff like this. This is why I loved my center before. I mean, we took a conservative campus, and my office became one of the most popular offices on campus. Talking about the Two-Spirit, my colleague that ran the Native department refused to work with me because he said his own constituents wouldn't go to him. And I said, oh, you have this so wrong. My office, the best thing about my office is that it encompasses everybody. So I'm going to have people with the Black program, right? Chicano program. So I crossed over. So I did all these programs with all the other programs, because you're not just gay, there's, gay people of color, trans people of color, and there has to be representation, And so I think my most latest journey here has been to take a step back. I tend to be pretty impulsive, which is why I came out the way I did with my dad. And I think how I've come out along the way, if I get a thought in my head, I'm not going to sit and wait. And it tends to get me into trouble, I think. But I think here at work, I'm learning for myself to kind of calm down, to let other people start educating other people. Every time something happens to me or somebody's kind of ignorant in the community, it's not always our job. It was a fascinating concept. It's not our job to educate the straight people who aren't familiar with what, we're going through. I just had an intense conversation the other day with somebody about the trans community and gender, and it went on for a good 5 minutes until it turned into a way where I was like, okay, I could take a deep breath. This person and I are going to be chill. Like, they just need to get some understanding of the community, because I was told that people were just looking to be kind of prickly, meaning we're, as gay people or as trans people, are looking for reasons to flare up. And I said, no. I said, look at my history. None of my family supported me. I don't have a relationship pretty much with most of my family because of this. And I refuse to. They come back around and apologize, I will be happy, to integrate. But I have lost so much of my family and the ability to get jobs. It's been a hard journey, but I think it's made me who I am, and I enjoy it because I now get to work. I worked at the LGBT Center for 4 years, and we brought Judy Shepard, and I was told, I don't want to support a gay function. That was our student body. To not enough people were going to go, and I said we'd have a lot of people. Our students aren't going to have space, so you can't do it. So I solved this problem by using a what do you call it? Like in the community, you can rent out halls, like massive halls. We had over 770 people show up.
Wow.
In New Mexico. Like, they bust people from El Paso, people from Albuquerque came down. I mean, it was big because it was couched along with, you had her, and then the next day you had a drag show, and every year our drag show kept getting bigger and bigger. The rooms kept getting bigger. And at some point we had to take the biggest space on campus without dividers to do it. I mean, so at this point in time, I think that, we as a community still have to be advocating. And I appreciate you letting me talk today, because I get to work with our LGBT community members, from a place of understanding and, vision now, and just that support, that they can see somebody else on the other side, that it's possible to be LGBT and, get an education and, to be liked by other people within like the greater straight community and have a career. I've chatted with some of my younger clients a couple of years ago. Do you think you could be in a position of mine? Well, no, people aren't going to accept me. I said, well, what do you think I'm doing? And I said, I had three sets of people while I was at the agency fire me as a clinician because of this, but I refused to change it. I had a manager saying that if it continues to happen, you're going to have to look at, how you present. And I said, I'm never going to change the way I present for a job. So that's not an option. So that is my story of craziness. It's like
and it all started at Ball State.
It did. It was such a wreck. Who goes to Ball State to come out? That was like, I think, the worst idea I could have ever done. I mean, nobody here really understands it. So we have a major diner in the city that's open 24 hours a day. And my friends from the LGBTQ community and all of the different ethnic minority programs, we would go out to the diner, right? And when we'd walk in or get on the bus on campus, people would just stare at us. I mean, so you're going from 2001 being stared at to actually being in a position where people are coming to you. It's a very odd thing to think about.
And the world keeps changing, which is good. And so that's why we all share our stories. And so that way we can help people be more their most authentic self.
Don't change who you are for the other person. Who the other person wants you to be is their own problem. It took me 19 years, and it took me this job and actually people in the straight community to set me right. So now I get to be me and let everybody else have the issue. If it's their issue, let them have it.
Right. Very good. Well, Sharna, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of your night. And I look forward to being able to sit down and having a cup of coffee with you as well. All right. Next up, we have Eric. Hello, Eric. Oh, you're muted.
Typical Zoom fashion, right? Always unmuting late. Well, thank you for having me. I will admit I was definitely on nerves today. I've never officially shared my coming out story, especially on such a platform as this. Mine, I feel like, is pretty much along the lines of others. I keep hearing stories and all day today, and it's just like, wow, there's a little bit of element in everyone's story that's the same. I happened to come out to my younger brother first. He was the first family member that I told. Throughout school, there were those friends, but there was no big like aha moment until my younger brother. I was leaving high school and he was coming in, and he was always the one that, although he was 4 years younger than me, always sticking up for me and was coming in as a freshman. And I was like, I just got to let you know, when someone like says like your brother's gay, please don't beat them up for me. Like, it's true. And so that was how I ended up coming out to him. Later on, it was probably almost a year later, I remember it was the day I got my braces off, and my mom and I had spent the entire day together. And we were driving home in the evening, and I was like, remember when you asked about my coworker who was gay? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I am too. And her response was, are you sure? And later on, I got real upset about it because I was like, of course I'm sure. Like, why did you ask me that? Like, it took a lot for me to tell you this. And that wasn't the response I wanted you to give me. And I've since then apologized. But my mom, being one of my best friends, has always just been our arguments or conversations, whatever, go on regularly. And she had said that she was hurt that I didn't tell her first. She was like, "Why did you have to tell your brother first?" And I was like, "Well, it was more out of necessity than like a sharing thing." So fast forward 10 years down the road, and I have another coming out that is always. First, it was coming out as gay, and with me now, it's a constant coming out of being HIV positive. That's another aspect that ends up being a huge part of me that I choose to share with other individuals. And having volunteered in the LGBT community for years, specifically, I'm actually right now in Tucson. That's my hometown. But I've been a part of the Phoenix community for a couple years now. But just being in and around safe all the time, HIV was never anything that I was afraid of. It was something that I was super aware of. That's where I heard of the miracle of PrEP and PEP. I went to my doctor and asked about it, and they were uneducated on it. And so I missed my opportunity then to educate the physician that I was working with. And but now every chance I get, now being HIV positive, I do. And the day that I decided to go get tested, I had a kind of already knew that there was a likelihood of it. And because of an at-home test. So get those at-home tests that are free all over the valley, free all over the state. I asked my best friend to take me to the clinic, because at the time I wasn't driving. I was living in another state, and I wanted to do it here at Safe. So I ended up coming home, and it ended up being my sister that took me later on. So my sister was the first one to find out. And I knew at that moment, it was like, uh-oh, mom's going to get mad because, again, she wasn't the first to know. So I opted for ripping the whole Band-Aid off at once. I ended up going to my grandmother's house. Both of my brothers at the time were working overnights, and it was mid-afternoon, so they wouldn't have been up by that time. But I called them both and was like, "Can you please meet me at grandma's?" So there was 4 generations in the house there, and it was my grandmother and my mom's 2 sisters and my mom and my siblings and a couple of their kids. And I ripped off the Band-Aid, and I told them all at once that I was HIV positive. And in the same way they all reacted to me being gay, it was the same reaction to me being HIV positive. "Okay, what do you need from us? We love you no less." And I told them all at once, so that no one person got offended for knowing before or after. Since then, I guess it's just pretty much been a regular thing to have to come out as gay and HIV positive now. Again, I wanted to say thank you for letting me share my story for the first time. I don't know what else.
Well, and thank you for your own inner strength and being able to share this on a public platform about your process of coming out, not just once, but twice. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Eric, have a great rest of your night.
You as well. Thank you.
All right, and next up we have Todd. Hello, Todd.
Hey, Marshall, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm great. I'm really happy to be here to be able to share this story and to hear those amazing stories of everybody before me. Isn't that what this is all about?
Yeah. That's exactly what it's all about, just getting us all to know each other just a little bit better.
So my story is actually in a book. So it's all in there. And I know we've been doing this for a little while. My book's Hide and Seek. There's no truth in fear. There's a notepad on it so I don't forget something. And I talk about my 50 years of playing a complex and exhausting game of hide and seek with my truth. And I think that's really what this is all about. When we talk about coming out, you know, truth gives you peace. It does. Truth gives you peace. And we fear that. There's a lot of fears that we have. And just like we started talking with Navi, and then we went on to Sharna, and all the same things. We hear things that make us feel less than. Someone makes a comment about a television show, or they look at somebody dressing funny, and children hear all those things, and we're not very mindful of our words. So a lot of my book and a lot of our stories about how words matter. You even mentioned at the beginning of the show how words matter. I heard all those words as a child, and I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be that. I want to be loved, and I want to be liked, and I don't want to be teased. Well, we hide, and sometimes when we hide in dark places, or we hide with other people hiding. So there's commiseration, and then there's collaboration, and there's a lot of things that happen codependently in that, and we don't necessarily get the information and the truth that we need to find our own voices. What I think is so powerful about this, and I thank you for letting me go towards the end, is I want to fast forward a little bit and notice how people kept coming out. You know, it's just not you're out and everything's good, right? We have our own process. Coming out is just a part of it. And then we evolve because our truth evolves. As we grow and as we learn, our truth changes. Our perception is our reality. How we dress. You know, Sharna was talking about how she presents herself, being authentic. That can evolve. How we express ourselves sexually, how we express ourselves emotionally, even the tone of our voice. There's so many things. There's so many nuances to a person. And I think we are hypersensitive to all of that because we have hid it in so many ways. So I'm just very excited that I got to hear all these stories today and to remind people that you don't just come out once. We just keep coming out. And it's okay to do so because our authenticity just continues to grow and evolve with our new truths and our new relationships and our new communities and with the world as it changes. I think we've heard a lot of changes in the last hour with all of our friends. I came out at 32 after being a husband, a father, a military veteran, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, all these things I did. And I was hiding. They were armor for me. You know, I think a lot of us develop these protective skills to help us hide. And they're to make us safe, but they end up doing harm over the long run. You know, they make us compromise our integrity. They silence our voices. And in the end, they keep us from being our true, magical, beautiful self. These stories are important. And so are the stories of what's next, what we're doing now. The people that we're talking to, the uncle that we say, hey, you know, maybe you shouldn't talk to him like that. You know, or it's kind of uncomfortable to tease someone about wearing that. You know, when you say that, your daughter at 6 years old hears you. And this is what can happen. I love you. That's why I'm telling you. And I don't think we do that enough. I think we've got into ourselves and got our story, and we're kind of on our story. This is our story. It's where I got here. Once we get here, let's take a breath and let's celebrate. Everybody should celebrate coming out, celebrate that courage that they had, and celebrate the wins and the victories, and also the victories of the defeats they had, because we learned from that too, and it made us stronger. I heard a lot of power and a lot of love and a lot of authenticity in all the voices tonight, and that makes me proud. That makes me just want to keep coming out and being loud about it. We can't forget that we'd love to hear, I would love to hear more stories that are common or normalized. You know, Teddy was talking about how his story was normalized. Yay, good.
Right.
But that's an important story too,
mm-hmm.
because that also gives people hope that, wow, okay, so, you know, it wasn't that rough. I'm sure it was a little rougher than Teddy said, but you notice how Teddy showed up. I noticed how Teddy showed up in this space, and Teddy showed up like that all his life.
Right.
You know, and he also had love and support to do that. Not all of us can do that. You know, I don't think there's a lot of truth in fear. I think fear is something that we're unwilling or incapable of doing, but there are monsters out there. So we have to find a balance to protect ourselves. I want to say to anybody out there who's struggling, you'll come out when it's your time. And I will say this, when you start to feel and you start to need and you start to want, there are many programs out there that can help you. Marshall, the work you do, I mean, there's so many opportunities here, 1 in 10, and I just, there's lists on my website and in my book about where you can go to help and talk to people. But also too, you're a resource. We're a resource because we've done it. Right. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget what we learned. I grew up in the 80s, right? In 83, AIDS came out, and I was liking boys and girls, and I went, whoa, I can't live that way. I'm afraid I can't live that way. And so I chose and went that direction. I'm thankful that I can love a woman and had that and have 2 children. Truth never loses its power, only voice. And we can't silence that voice. And now that once we're out, we need to start talking about it and start making a difference and start normalizing things. Start talking about the people in our office. Start talking about what we do on our weekends. Don't just say, well, I went out with my friends. No, I went to this LGBTQ fair. I went to a rummage sale with the Sisters of, all that. Right. Say it, share it, because you don't know. The reason why people say no to things is because they don't KNOW any different. Let's teach them who we are. Right. I have to listen to their dumb stories about something. They can listen to mine.
Exactly.
So listen, I know we've been here for quite a while. I didn't want to keep rambling on, but again, thank you so much. And to everybody out there, just keep coming out. Just keep telling your story. And you know what? Don't forget that someone out there is struggling too. It doesn't matter if they're gay, straight, bi, transgender. It doesn't matter. Empathy is very important, and everybody has something they're going through. If we show up in faith, right, with integrity, authentically, you almost demand that and pull that out of people. If you show up in that space like this is who I am, it's very difficult for someone to deny that and not show up who they are as well, because you're inviting them to be integral. You're inviting them to be authentic because you are. Let's not forget that power we have. Being ourselves, complete and wonderful made that we are. We're all carbon and spirit. Thank you so much.
And I think that's actually been one of the positive things I think coming out of COVID is when you have organizations like Arizona Virtual Pride. I mean, I was able to go into a coffee chat section, and there is a 13-year-old kid who shows up as a chat member and says, I couldn't tell my family where I wanted to go, but I can sneak off over here and be a part of this conversation. So I mean, the power of now him being able to say, I know people. I know people have done this. They've moved on. They've grown. Being able to do that. I mean, also coming out in the 80s as well, when HIV/AIDS was just that fear mongering that first started out, and trying to figure out what does that do. And so that's one thing I loved is all the different coming out processes of our stories, and that we never stop coming out. And that realizing sometimes it's not necessarily even just for you, but it is for those other folks that are struggling. And you never know, when you mention something, somebody will be like, oh, wait a minute. I should ask them about that, but not here in a public place. Let me do it kind of offline a little bit and have a private conversation.
Yeah.
And so
it was interesting listening to people's stories. Some were very emboldened, some were whatever. I think we all have those moments where we think we have this cape on, but most of us were pretty pensive, to walk into something, and then we became empowered. That little bubble is nice to ride, but we also can't forget that someone's afraid, and maybe some people running in and screaming is not going to do well. Some families are receptive, some are not, and it does make sense to realize where you came from and work in that environment. Yes, you can say I'm out and I'm proud, but you also want your loving source of your families too. Many of us isolate and we hide and we withdraw, and that's a loving source that many of us lose either by just default and not talking, or misunderstanding. And then there are those that just say, no, it's not going to happen. That's unfortunate, but we're your family too. And I think one of the things I've learned, the reason why I say there's no truth in fear, is because time and time again, all those things I was afraid of never came to fruition. My father loved me, my mother loved me, my brothers loved me, my lovers didn't deny me, my friends loved me. I came out at 32. It's been 20 years now. And I just think it's interesting. And like Eric, one of my things, within 45 days of coming out, I was infected with HIV. So I went from, you know, nobody's going to love me, right? No, I want everybody to love me because I'm gay, right? And then I came out, I go, I don't care who loves me. I got my truth. To 45 days later, I was like, no one's ever going to love me again. So I was like this, and I had to work through that. So again, it was coming out that way. And then now you go through, where are you sexually, and what do you like, and what are those preferences, and there's shame associated with that. There's always work to be done.
Right.
There's always work to be done in all of us. Gay,
Right.
straight,
We're always evolving.
We are. Let's just love each other.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you again, Marshall. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
My pleasure.
Have a great rest of your night.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
So I want to give a huge shout out to all of our storytellers. Navi, Teddy, Sharna, Eric, and Todd, thank you so much for joining us and opening up and sharing your stories and your personal journeys about how you got to where you are today. I think it is so important that people hear that. And as Todd says, that we take this moment to celebrate us, but also those communities that we've developed around us is so important. And so also I would like to give a huge shout out to CJ and to Andrew with Fierce Friends, who basically put this together. Thank you so much for asking me to host this. I always love doing stuff like this because it's just another way that we get to share stories. And that's pretty much what I do, is share people's stories, because there is power in all of those stories. We each take our own story and incorporate then other people's stories into that. So thank you all so much for sharing with us. Have a great rest of your Sunday, your National Coming Out Day. I know there are different groups across the state. Some of them are celebrating Coming Out Month, which I think, especially in this moment of COVID, just being open and honest and authentic about who you are with others can only help you develop a better energy around you and folks that really are truly there for you, regardless of where that story takes you. So have a great rest of your Sunday. I look forward to seeing you all at some point, hopefully much sooner than later. But again, have a great Sunday night.